Hello, I'm Geraldine and these are my novel opinions. In this video I'm going to go through the books that I read in July 2026. Now life has been continuing to happen here. I now have a working downstairs loo, brilliant, and I have curtains up in my bedroom, excellent, but I still don't have a shower. Hopefully that will be rectified in the next few days. Someone's supposed to be coming on Friday to put in a new shower for us. So let's hope that happens, because I'm fed up of functional baths, they're no fun. That has partly impacted on my reading time. The other thing that impacted on my reading time was that the first book I read in the month was not only very long, but I found a little bit of a struggle. So let's get right into it. So that first book that I read was Independent People by Halldór Laxness, an Icelandic saga. It's about a man who grew up in service, really, and he decided that he wanted to be independent, and he bought himself a plot of land which the locals said was cursed, and he'd never make it work. But he was absolutely determined, and he was very idealistic about being independent. He didn't want help from anyone. Now I noticed this because it was on one of the Kindle daily deals for 99p, and when I looked into it I noticed that a lot of writers have said that they found it an inspiration to them, and in part I can see why. His description of people and how they are is microscopically detailed, and some of the descriptions of interactions between people were absolutely masterful. However, I found the whole a bit of a drag. There were some short and exciting episodes, but there were also a lot of very long passages that I found myself skim reading. That might mean that I missed out on some of the things that people like so much about this book, but I'm afraid it just wasn't for me. Most of the characters are absolutely awful. I did read that it's a tragicomedy, and I suppose some of those awful characters could be seen as funny. For example, there's a priest who says he won't do a funeral. He doesn't want to do a funeral because he can't be bothered to walk all the way there. But the protagonist himself, in his idealism, is an absolute monster to all those around him, and I just couldn't find any humour in that whatsoever. The book is I think it's about 600 pages long, and it's split into 2 volumes. It was originally written in 2 parts. The first is definitely better than the second, which I found very turgid. But maybe that's the kind of thing that people like in it, is the long discussions between people. But it just wasn't for me, I'm afraid. I'm glad I've read it, but it's not one that I will be going back to. The next book I read was Queen Macbeth by McDermid. This is one of the Darkland Tales series, a series of books written by Scottish authors retelling tales from a Scottish folklore or history. I read back in November 2025, I read Ben Lerner by Graham McCrae Burnett, which I enjoyed very much. This one is, as you probably guessed, about Lady Macbeth. Now we don't know much about Lady Macbeth other than she was called Gruach, and Val McDermid has used this to her advantage and kind of run with the idea and taken a few nuggets of what history we do know surrounding her, or at least her husband, and she's woven them into quite an exciting tale. Despite the fact that Shakespeare based his play on a very inaccurate history of Macbeth, Val McDermid has nevertheless included several nods to him in her story. There are some direct quotes, and also she includes the 3 witches in a very different guise. Overall, I found the story very exciting. It was very enjoyable. There was, however, one plot point that I wasn't terribly pleased with. I found it unlikely, a little bit too convenient, and surprisingly unfeminist for Val McDermid. But overall, I thought it was a great read. It's a very short read too. I also listened to the audiobook The Land and Its People by David Sedaris. I'm a huge David Sedaris fan, and I've listened to most of his collections, and I do think you have to listen to him rather than read the books to get the most out of them. This is very much more of the same fare. If you've enjoyed his previous work, then you'll like this too. His previous couple of collections have included some rather shocking and sad details about his family, and while there are a few more details here, it's not as much like that. It's much more like his usual stuff, but nevertheless it's still very funny and very good. If you haven't listened to him before, I wouldn't start here, because by this time he's kind of assuming you have a certain amount of back knowledge about him, so I'd go back to his earlier stuff. But yes, I'd recommend him. I find him very funny indeed. There's no particular theme running through it. It's just a collection of essays, and so I wouldn't say it was a standout collection, but it's still well worth listening to if you do enjoy his material. The next book I read was Transcription by Ben Lerner. I've been hearing rave reviews about this book, but listening to those reviews, I did wonder whether it was my kind of thing. But as it's quite a short book, I decided to go for it anyway. It starts off telling the story of a man who's going to interview his mentor. His mentor's quite elderly now, but just before he leaves, he drops his phone in the sink and it stops working, so he can't record the interview. This means he has to rely on his memory to a certain extent when he comes to write up the interview itself. And at the same time, his mentor's memory is beginning to give out a little bit. It did feel to me rather like 2 or 3 unconnected short stories, other than the fact that there was some characters in common. And I wasn't quite sure what it was trying to get at. Ray from Ray Loves to Read said that she found the messaging rather heavy-handed and unsubtle, but I just didn't get it at all. I had to look it up afterwards. I read that this book is kind of a discussion about how modern technology can both help and hinder us, which might answer what I thought was a fairly obvious question: why didn't he just use a pencil and paper if he didn't have his phone to record on? But I still feel that is a little bit of a plot hole. And also I don't really see what that has to do with the later part of the book, where someone is talking about their young daughter who refuses to eat food. So overall, this wasn't for me. I tend not to go for philosophical books where you're supposed to think over the messages and so on. But if I can't see what those messages are, and I don't think that they fit with what the book is saying anyway, no, I don't think this book was for me. Finally, I read a graphic novel, Sea of Dreams by Cixin Liu. I'm going to put this down because it's taking up rather a lot of the camera space. I read his 3 Body Problem trilogy and I really enjoyed that. So I was looking forward to reading this. Now, I haven't read the short story on which this graphic novel was based, so I might be being a little bit unfair to the author, but I found the storyline as thin as tissue paper. Basically, humanity has a problem and it solves it, and that's about it. In a little bit more detail, what happens is that an alien comes to Earth, and he calls himself an artist, and he goes around the universe and takes all the water from planets and turns them into an artwork. And of course, once he's taken all the water out of Earth, then humanity has got a big problem. That's it for the storyline. There's a very brief discussion of what is most important in life and to humanity, but it's barely touched on really. I do hope that it's discussed more in the short story, because that is really what makes the story. I'm not a huge expert on graphic novels, so I can't really comment on the graphics themselves, the artwork, but they seem good to me. Ironic then that part of the argument in this book is that art is unimportant in life. But overall, the story itself, it was quite exciting. It was a good read. So I'm not saying avoid it. I'm just saying don't get your hopes up if your previous experience of Cixin Liu is the three-body problem. Oh, and I do like to avoid politics on this channel, but there were some rather funny digs at Trump in this book. So that might be another reason to read it, or not. Anyway, that's all my books for July. I'm currently reading The Matchbox Girl, which again, I'm getting through very slowly because I'm just not finding the time to read at the moment. But I am enjoying that so far. So I will let you know what I think of that in my August roundup at the beginning of next month. So I hope you're having a good reading month yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.